Good morning, everyone. I am Lecturer Patrick, and I will be taking you through introduction to African culture and religion throughout the semester. And I therefore, in this early beginning, request each and every one of you to be keen to take notes, to be prepared to learn together with me, and also to learn new things. I would wish to believe that by the virtue of being in university, you've all qualified to be here, and you understand what it means with culture, what it means with religion. And this is the unit I am going to tackle with you throughout the semester. The unit name is African Culture and Religion, and its code is 112. We will begin with the introduction of this unit, Introduction to African Culture and Religion. And I barely would wish to ask all of you here, those who are able to define the term culture, to define, those who are able to define the term religion, to define, for us to have a better introduction of the unit. Believing that all of us understand what culture is and religion is, I would just briefly remind us what culture is, what religion is, and what generally African culture and religion refers to. Culture is a way of living. In an exam, if I ask you to define the term culture, and then you tell me that culture is a way of living of people, then you will earn yourself full 2 marks. Religion is the way people interact in their beliefs and customs. That's a simple definition of religion. African culture is the way is the way of living by Africans. That's what we call African culture, is the way of living by Africans. That is the definition of the term African culture. African culture and religion, or the definition of African religion, is simply the way Africans believe and the way African practice their customs. That is simply the way we can define it. And let us come let us come to our today's business, African culture. African culture is diverse. It is a diverse course. Over 300 ethnic groups and languages, each with distinct customs and tradition, practice this culture we are calling African culture. Community and social structures, emphasis and communal living and extended family networks. Oral tradition. It's a culture that is full of sources. That's for instance, the oral tradition, storytelling, proverbs, and oral histories. Arts and crafts, music, dance, sculpture, textiles, and beadwork. Rites of passage, ceremonies marking significant life stages. Briefly, African culture and religion is a broad culture in African communities that has been practiced differently. Some African culture practice this culture through storytelling, proverbs, others through emphasis on communal living, others through music, arts and crafts, others through rites of passage. And just as the communities are many in Africa, similarly, the cultures are as many as the communities are. Religions as well are as many as the communities. Each community have their own God they worship. leave alone the God, the Christian God that you've been taught in high school. Here in African culture and religion, we are going to basically look at African and their beliefs and traditions. Like, for instance, the people from Kakamega, people from Kalenjin, people from Luoland, people from every part of Kenya have their own God they used to worship. The Kamba community used to worship a god called Ngai. The Kikuyu similarly used to worship a god called Ngai, you see, and other many others, other many gods as communities are different. Let us come to traditional African religion as our next subtopic, beliefs and systems in Africa, in traditional African religions. Supreme Creator is one of them. African communities believe that there is a supernatural being, a creator, believe in a distant supreme God. Like I've said, in Kamba community, they believe in a supernatural being called Ngai, Mulungu, Mumbi, or sometimes Mwatwangi. You see, in every community, they have one belief that there exists a God. There exists a supernatural being whom we are referring in this case to be God. Another belief in traditional African religions is the spirits and ancestors. All communities in African traditions have revere for spirits and ancestors as intermediators. I would wish to inform us all here that there is no single community in Africa that do not believe in spirits, that do not believe in ancestor worship. Things have just changed the other day with the Christianity introduction into Africa. But as the Swahili people will say, Mwachamira ni mtumwa, Africans have retained their belief in ancestry and their belief in spirits. They take these ancestors, these spirits, as intermediators for them, between them and God. Now, another belief that is honed dearly by African religions is rituals and ceremonies. You find out that in different communities, different rituals and ceremonies are performed. For instance, offerings, prayers, music, and dance for spiritual communication. In an event where we have burial, you find communities. Let me use a Kenyan community, for instance, Luya community and the Luo community. You find out that during their burials, there is a lot of singing, there is a lot of celebrations. You see, these are rituals they perform for their beloved gone persons. Music, you find out in different communities. For instance, the Kamba community, music is a way of living there, and therefore this is one of element, what we are calling belief systems, one of element in their culture. Dancing is also part and parcel of their life for spiritual communication. Another element, another belief system in African religion is religious practitioners, priests, diviners, and healers. Priests, diviners, and healers are found in mostly all communities. For instance, in Kenya, we have about 45 communities. Leave alone in Kenya, look at the broad Africa. How many communities do we have? As many communities we have, so is the priests, diviners, and healers, and different beliefs in the same. We also have another belief system, what we are also calling syncretism. Syncretism is blending of traditional practices with Christianity and Islam. This is a belief that has been actualized from 19th century onwards. Many communities have blended their religion, their beliefs with the Christians. For instance, the act of singing in Christianity, particularly in Catholicism, whereby you find out people using drums, is a African community thing that has been borrowed and blended from African community and incorporated in the Christianity. The singing, the drum beating, the kayamba thing, and many others. That's just an example of various blending traditional practices with the Christianity and Islamic. When you go revise, look at more elements. For today, we will look only on those 5. In an exam, I may be tempted to ask you to explain 10, and then you earn yourself 20 marks. One purpose of a learner is to do research. Now you are not again in high school where you used to be examined on only what you've been taught. Here in university, we examine the student ability to do research, the student ability to learn on their own, and therefore that's why I'm asking and pleading with us all here to do research on elements of religion and belief system of African tradition. Now let us embark on impact of colonialism on African religions. How has colonial era impacted African religions? Number 1, colonial influence, spread of Christianity. It is through colonialism that Christianity came to Africa. Therefore, it has impacted African religions in that there have been changes due to the introduction of Muslim or the Islam religion and Christianity among other new religions that have just come into Africa. Persistence and adaptation of traditional beliefs. It has impacted Africans in that Africans are resilient to adapting the new religion, but in rather keeping or retaining their traditional beliefs. Merging of traditional and introduced religious elements has also quite been an impact to Africans, and therefore it's significant that we see to this. Now, the issue of monotheism also is another impact. It's not in my notes, as you can see, but it is very significant for us all to understand that colonialism on African religion has impacted on monotheism, the act of worship of one God. Initially, before the colonial masters came to Africa, Africans used to have various gods, various denominations, various beliefs and systems. But upon coming of colonizers to Africa, there is now the essence of worship of one God, what I am calling monotheism. The colonialism on African religion has also impacted the way of living, the way of worship. Africans used to have different ways of worship, but upon the coming of colonizers to Africans, there have been a common way of worship as compared to them before the colonialism eras. Now, I've discussed with us 5 impacts. Again, I urge us all, we go and do thorough research. I have given in the notes on the portal the references. Go do more research, have as many impacts as possible. For in exam, I will not only consider the 5 I have dictated here or lectured here, but I will ask either 8, 10 to test your ability to do research. Let us define some terms as used in African culture and religion. Number 1, we are defined the term culture. And I again here want to emphasize different definition of culture from different perspectives as different scholars have defined the term culture. Culture generally has been defined as a collection of shared values, practices, and artifacts of a group. This is what I simply said is a culture is the way of living, is the people's way of living. Religion is system of spiritual beliefs and practices. What I earlier defined simply to mean religion is the way people spiritually practice their beliefs. African culture is defined as rich and diverse communal living, oral tradition, arts, and rites of passage. African religion, as I earlier defined, it's belief in supreme being, spirits, ancestors, and syncretic practices. Let's move forward to the importance of the study of African culture and religion. I know you people, you are here doing beard arts, bachelor's degree in arts, and a bachelor's degree in education, arts, and social sciences. You are here because you want in future to be employed. So I want to use from the known to the unknown. You know, you are here to be teachers of religion so that tomorrow you are employed and you earn a living. Therefore, one key important or significance of the study of African culture and religion is that it's a source of employment or for career purposes. You see, there are scholars of African culture and religion like John Mbiti. You know that him as a scholar of African culture and religion, he earns a living through this, through his studies, through his ability to deliver content about African culture and religion. He is a professor. He is a doctor he has done doctorate of philosophy in African culture and religion particularly, and therefore he earns a living through this. This is one of the advantages. So, and use an example of yourself in an event in exam, you cannot remember any other point. Remember, you want to become a teacher so that you get employed and you earn living, and say it's the one's importance of it is that it is a career unit. You can become a professor in it and teach it in universities, become a scholar on the same, become a consultant on the same, and then you earn your living through the same. Another reason or importance why we study African culture and religion, it is to understand our culture. The rich diversity of African cultures and tradition cannot merely be understood by unscholarly people. You must be a scholar of this culture for you to interpret it, for you to understand it. You must study. So one important reason is that you study this to understand the diversity of cultures. There before I've talked about different cultures, different communities in Africa. And now here I'm telling you that for you to understand these cultures, you must study African culture and religion. Therefore, it is significant to study African culture and religion. Historical insights. We study this African culture and religion for historical insights to understand the pre-colonial religions, colonial religion, post-colonial history of religion, and so forth. We also study, it is important again, because through the study of African culture and religion, we understand the social impact of religion. We understand its insight, religious insight into gender roles, family structures, and community organizations. It is also significant in understanding global perspective, influence on global arts, literature, music, and cuisines. Another significant reason for studying African culture and religion, or reason behind why we study African religion, is that to be able to rewrite the history of religion. We study this religion, African culture and religion, for us to be in a position to rewrite African culture and religion history. Without the study, we cannot rewrite back this, and therefore the study is significant in assisting to write the history of religion in Africa. I continue emphasizing we go forth and read and do research. Our next subtopic is primary sources of African culture and religion. And I had given you a brief introduction on this while I was introducing the unit. And I ask us to go through these 5 sources together. And then in your own free time, go forth and learn more. There are more than 20 African sources, particularly primary sources. I will only ask you 10. Therefore, go and do more research. I will give you 5, do research of 5, and then we meet in exams and you will do well. Now, oral tradition and folk tales is one. You can have oral tradition as one point and folklore is another point. But let us, in our case here, have them as one point. Narratives, myths, legends, folktales passed down through generations. For example, creation of myths of various African ethnic groups is a primary source of African culture and religion through myths. Like, for example, you see, the Kikuyu community do believe that they originated from Mumbi, from there, the 9 daughters. And that's just an example of a myth in Kikuyu religion. There are other myths in different communities. You can have them by listening to them. Then you get the primary information about that particular religion, that particular culture. Therefore, for oral traditions and folklores. And you can have, you see, I've mentioned narratives, myth, legend, and folktales. You can go further and make each a primary source. It is possible, depending on how you're going to describe you are going to give us your argument, depending on how you are going to explain your work. Artifacts and archaeological findings is another primary source of African culture and religion. Objects like sculptures, masks, pottery, and tools. Example, terracotta ends from Nok culture in Nigeria. That's a good example of artifacts that have been used to understand culture and religion. And particularly in this case, we say it's a primary source. We have religious texts and scriptures. Sacred texts like the Ifa divination text of the Yoruba people or the pyramid text of the ancient Egyptian is a source of African culture and religion, particularly primary source. Through understanding these sacred texts like the Ifa, I have just mentioned the Ifa divination text of the Yoruba people or the pyramid text of ancient Egypt, we get to understand the African culture and religion better. Ethnographic studies and field notes is another primary source. Now, when we talk of ethnographic studies, we basically talk of anthropologists and explorers going into the communities and staying with them, coming up with different understandings from different perspectives or from different people. And therefore, I want to pick an example of E. Evans Pritchard on the Nuo people, who gave us about the story about the culture of the Nuo people, and who has also been known as the father of the Nuo people culture. Another one is song. Songs are also primary sources. Nobody who do not know a song, but different communities have different songs. composed about their culture and about their religion. We also have folk tales. When we are talking about folk tales, we are also talking about this African culture and religion. Folk tales describe further how different communities lived, how different religion originated, and so forth. Go forth and do more research, and you will be a good student. You'll be good students. Now, I want us to focus again on 4 more secondary sources of African culture and religion. I've said I will give 4, but in an exam, I may be tempted to ask you to explain 5, and then I give you 20 marks. Therefore, be good students and go forth following the references I've given to my notes. Do research, and also you can use different engines to get different points. Number 1, I want us to begin with academic books as a second resource. Comprehensive analysis by historians and anthropologists. Example, African Religions, Simple Rituals, Communities by Benjamin C. Ray is an example of a second resource of African culture and religion, whereby you analyze in a particular book how different anthropologists examined different cultures and religion. And I've given an example of Simples, Rituals, and Community by Benjamin C. Ray. Benjamin C. Ray is an African culture book that he wrote in explanation to explain what African culture is, to explain how African religions are and how African religions have been for a number of years. Now, another secondary source of African culture and religion is journal articles. Peer-reviewed studies on specific aspects of African culture and religions is an example of secondary source of African culture and religion. Example, articles in the Journal of African History. Number 3, anthropologists. Number 3 are anthropologies and edited volumes. Collections of essays on diverse topics within African studies. For example, Oxford Handbook of African Religions is another example of secondary source of African culture and religion. Lastly, but not the least, documentaries and films, visuals, explorations of religious practices and cultural traditions. Example, The God Must Be Crazy series is another example of secondary sources. Let us look at the other subtopic, importance of the sources in the study of African sources. How are these sources, the primary sources and secondary sources, important? They help us understand cultural diversity in different African communities. They also help us understand historical insights. For instance, I talked of pre-colonial and colonial, post-colonial history of religion and culture. They also help us understand the diversity in religion and cultures, indigenous religions, Christianity, and also Islam. Another importance of these sources in the study of African culture and religion is that they help us understand the social impact in that insights into gender roles, family structures, and community organizations. The last importance I have here for these sources is that they help us understand religion in global perspective and their influence on global arts, literature, music, and cuisines. Our last discussion here is an example of questions you expect to appear in exams. And the first question is, examine the secondary sources used in the study of African culture and religion. As I earlier said, that will be a question that might entail 20 marks and do research. And the last question I will give you is discuss 5 ways in which the sources of African culture and religion can be important in the study. Have a blessed day, and let us meet in the next lesson, face-to-face class as usually. Therefore, I wish you the very best.